So at the end of the Middle Ages, we have a resurgence or a rebirth of arts and education. The Italian word, I believe it's Italian, is the Renaissance. Renaissance literally translates to rebirth. And this is a rebirth of, of art and learning in Europe, because before, everywhere else, for the most part, was still learning, was still producing art, was still participating in this outside of yourself type of stuff. During the Middle Ages, because of the lack of art and, or I should say a lack of non-secular art, it's all church focused, the church is going to dictate what can and cannot be done. So in Italy, we have this rebirth of non-secular, so outside of the church, focus. In the Middle East, they made some really amazing products, and it can be anywhere between jewelry and clothing and food and all of these things that Western Europe didn't have for such a long time during the invasions, during the Crusades, during the plague. All of these things are happening. So during the Renaissance, we have the demand for new products in Western Europe. Now, remember, Western Europe doesn't have a lot of tactile, in-your-hand type of monetary goods. They don't have a lot of currency because they've been so isolated. So we have this new use of banks and accounting. And we're going to have the creation and expansion of using credit, using money that you don't have right now, but you will have so you can pay it back, but I'm going to have to pay it back with interest. With the expanded supply of credit, we're going to see a speeding up of trade. This bookkeeping using Arabic numbers, is going to increase the trade with the Middle East and Arabic countries, modern day countries, territories, cities, what have you. These economic foundations of banking and the use of credit is going to live much longer than they anticipated back then. In Italy, we have three major cities or ports of trade. We have Florence, Venice, and Genoa. These three cities work in conjunction to spread these goods, these banks, these lines of credit to more places. Now, if we look closely, we can see that Genoa is on the coast, Florence is in the center, and Venice is also on the coast. So we have two ways of getting into the land, and then we can go down from these port cities into Florence and then to Rome. Eventually, we're going to go north into Northern Europe. Okay, the trade is going to be centered in major cities, just like always. The big difference is that it's not going to be controlled by a government. It's going to be controlled by merchant families that are very wealthy. And these families are going to have such control over the trade that the governments will eventually go to them for help, for money, for all of those pieces. And it is going to spread north into Europe. There's just going to be a switch of what's most important for these Italian families. They are republics, but these Italian wealthy families, they're going to set the price. They're going to set kind of everything. And in this area, we have writers, artists, and books being created. The first one in Italy is Niccolo Machiavelli. Now, Machiavelli is writing a book called The Prince, and he is actually going to talk about in his book how a ruler should rule. And it must be, according to Machiavelli, an absolute rule and understanding that the ends justify the means. You should be good, according to Machiavelli. But if you have to kill 1,000 people, then you kill 1,000 people, as long as you get the end result that you need. Machiavelli is going to write this in such a way that it's going to appeal to a lot of ruling families. During this time period, you're also going to have a focus or a movement away from the focus on the church and salvation. During the Middle Ages, because the church was the unifying factor, all pieces of arts are going to focus on the church, salvation, Jesus, Mary, all the Christian Bible stuff. During the Renaissance, it's going to focus more on the individuals and worldly matters and helping people with pieces of Christianity thrown in. It's not just going to be alone Christianity. Mona Lisa and The Last Supper are really good examples of how Italian artists during the Renaissance are going to utilize the church plus non-secular or worldly individual ideals. Leonardo da Vinci is going to create one of the first and most debated pictures that are still around. Now, the Mona Lisa is such a big deal because of who it depicts, and there's not 100% certainty of who it's supposed to be, and the fact that she is smiling. Up to this point, during pictures, paintings being done, you didn't smile because you had to sit for such a long time. He's also going to create the Last Supper that is told in the Bible, and he does it in such a way that it humanizes the ideals of the Last Supper. Now we have Michelangelo. Michelangelo is an artist. He is a sculptor and a painter. He's going to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which is depicting God reaching for man, and man is half-heartedly reaching back. And then he is going to create the sculpture of David. Now, the sculpture of David is depicting the story of David and Goliath. The difference is both of these take individual human qualities of what the body would look like to them at this time and puts it into a Christian setting. So we have the anatomy of a man being depicted with the stories of Christianity. In the Northern Renaissance, so this is in Northern Europe, so outside of Italy, it is going to have the same effect on the economy, the increase of trade. It's also going to have an increase in literacy. Remember, during the Dark Ages, people didn't know how to read and write because it wasn't important to survival. During the Renaissance, though, people want to read and write, especially those in the upper class, because then it meant you had money. Being able to read and write during this time was a privilege. And if you were able to do these things, that meant you didn't have to work every single day. And it's going to change the ideas of Northern Europe. During this time, Northern Europe is going to move completely away from putting the church into its arts. So when Petrarch is writing sonnets, he is focusing solely on the human. He creates the humanistic approach. He is going to take out the idea that the church has anything to do with the human psyche. Humanism is looking at the individual without any type of religion. It's looking at the nature of people, and it's going to be focused on and come from the Greco-Roman traditions of literature, culture, without the beginnings of Christianity. Now, these people, these artists, don't work for a living the way that people think, so they have to find patrons, people who are willing to pay for these works of art, and these patrons are going to pay for living expenses, food, housing, anything the artist may need. You also have Erasmus. Now, we had Machiavelli talking about how rulers should be absolute rulers and you do good when you can, but the ends justify the means. Now, Erasmus is going to create a story or a book called The Praise of Folly, and he is going to be around the same ideals of doing what you must, but he's going to talk specifically about the church and how corrupt the Catholic Church has come. And he is going to be the catalyst. He's the starting point. He's going to be the little seed of doubt for people who are within the Catholic Church but don't fully believe the Catholic Church is doing what it can for its people. So he is the starting point, the seed for the Protestant Reformation or another great schism within the Christian Church. Also during this time, you have the move away from illuminated manuscripts. So you have the creation of the movable type printing press. This allows for books to be reprinted much more quickly than before. Monks no longer have to rewrite every book by hand. Johannes Gutenberg, is going to be the one that first creates this, and he creates this to make books more accessible, price-wise and time-wise to the modern human. And what actually is done is that this new invention is going to be used to recreate the most reproduced book, the Bible. Sir Thomas More is our next writer in Northern Europe, in Northern Renaissance. Now, Sir Thomas More in 1516 writes a book called Utopia, in which he writes out what a perfect society, a perfect legal system, a perfect government would look like. And he is going to do this based on the humanistic approach of Petrarch.